My son started acting out. I went to the school counselors and it was basically, they said, a puberty thing.
And at some point he came to you and he said he wanted some information about how to look up sex weirdos?
Yes. I asked him who he was looking up, and he said he wanted to see if Jerry was on there. And I said, well, why would you look him up? And he said, I don't know, he's a weirdo. And I proceeded to ask him if there was something he needed to tell me, and at that point he didn't indicate anything. I called the school and expressed my concerns. I told them to pull my son down to the guidance office and talk to him, and they did. At that point they called me telling me that it was very important that I get there immediately, which at that point I already had suspicions, so I kind of knew what it was about.
Can't get much more direct and clear than that. Dr. Pete Stavinoha joins us. He's a child neuropsychologist here at the Children's Medical Center. Doc, good morning to you.
Good morning.
We've all had to become, as is typical in talk radio, sort of smash experts here quickly in this field. It's been hard to do. It's been hard to take. Yep. It's been hard to deal with. You guys do this. You do this, and you help children professionally. Walk us through the aftermath of that phone call, because the next visit, I'm going to presume, by this mother and son was probably to someone like you.
Yeah, I mean, it's a devastating thing. You know, certainly there's the trauma that's occurred, and then a lot of times the term we'll use is there's almost a re-traumatization at the time when all of this then gets discovered, because now the child's having to tell different people, and usually there's authorities getting involved, and it becomes a very big, difficult ordeal for the child and certainly for the family, because the family is obviously, has a mix of emotions of anger and guilt and, all these things, wondering oh my gosh, how could I have not protected my child, and all these natural emotions that anyone would have in such a difficult, traumatic situation. And then just as you were alluding prior to the clip, the long-term effects of this really are that's what sticks with the child, and that can shape their future.
Tell us what when these young people will arrive in this state and in this sort of condition. They're obviously initially afraid to talk about it sometimes, or just don't want to talk about it because of the trauma. And I understand that they also, in some cases, feel guilty for it, as if it's their own fault.
Absolutely. I think that, a lot of times that's, again, just like the adults will have that mixture of emotions, the kids will have the same or a similar mixture of emotions where they just, they feel repulsed by what has happened, but they also have this sense of responsibility, almost like, well, I let it happen somehow, or and this whole idea where they brought it on themselves it just contributes to this stew of emotions that kids will have. And so you've got this kind of acute just distress that the child is in from a mix of a range of emotions, not just one, I feel badly or traumatized, but it's all of the different emotions that a child may feel sort of contribute to the difficulty in getting through the initial phase.
With us for a moment, Dr. Pete Stavinoha. He's a child neuropsychologist at Children's Medical Center here. What are the long-term effects for someone, 10 years old? We know that some of these kids are 22 now. Some of them are 27. In that intervening time, theoretically, they get counseling. Maybe they don't because the acts aren't necessarily known or they're not revealed.
Right.
Untreated, what happens?
Well, we talk in these kind of cases, we talk in terms of relative risk, because there are some people that are they're resilient by nature. They don't have as many effects as you would expect, but then there's other people that it literally defines and shapes their life. And so we look at risks for difficulties with relationships. We look at risk, there's certainly academic risks, doing poorly in school, behavior problems, substance use and abuse, difficulty with longer-term relationships, establishing them, maintaining them, psychiatric difficulties, anxiety disorders, depression, post-traumatic stress disorders. When you think about all of these kinds of risks, if a young person has them, that then contributes, that sort of limits their functional potential as an adult. And so they may carry this baggage with them, and that may, place a lot of limitations just on their general functional abilities as they grow up.
Take us for a moment outside the realm of the effect on the children themselves and into the minds of somebody like Sandusky. I understand just from some of the reading that they recognize that what they're doing is wrong, but they don't have any guilt over it. I mean, most of us just don't have a frame of reference. And I will tell you that as non-professionals, one of the things I've heard that I personally have struggled with this week and our audience has struggled with this week is understanding what would happen in somebody's brain that they would look at a 10 or 12-year-old boy as a sexual object. It's not that it's unnerving, it's all of those things, of course, but it's just so unreal in that sense that the vast majority of us look at a child and we simply see a child.
That's right. I mean, it's trying to, I think that the difficulty even for professionals is trying to give a rational explanation for irrational behavior, and that's really what this is. I mean, there really is no good explanation for it. I wish we understood what was happening in these people's brains, but we really don't. As you described, a lot of times it's almost a compulsory type behavior where the person recognizes what they're doing is not the right thing to do, and yet they still feel this compulsion, this urge that they follow through with. Sometimes there is feelings of guilt, sometimes not. Unfortunately, we just don't fully grasp and can't necessarily predict who's going to end up this way. But it really is trying to give a rational explanation to something that is just so outside the norm that it sort of defies a reasonable explanation.
With us for a moment, Dr. Pete Stavinoha, child neuropsychologist at the Children's Children's Medical Center. What for you as a professional, do we do enough as a society to condemn and deal with this, or have we, as I say oftentimes in this program, what we tolerate in one generation becomes the norm in the next? It almost feels like this has become the norm because it seems to happen with such frequency that it makes me think that not nearly enough is being done to either publicize it or stop it. And that's just anecdotal. That's not data-driven.
Sure,
what do you see?
Yeah, I think that the trends don't necessarily support that it's become more normal or more accepted or more even that much more common. Now, the trends are only documented cases. What we don't know are what the undocumented cases are, and I don't want to neglect saying that because as soon as you start looking at statistics, well, the statistics are based on cases that have been reported. But that just we don't really have a good understanding of just how many cases are out there that are not reported that kids never bring to light, and yet they struggle with kind of throughout their life. And so I think it's instances like this. A lot of times I'll boil it down to my advice to an individual parent, and so it's instances like this that need to sort of re-energize our vigilance to these things. And so preparing our kids, sort of reminding ourselves to be very mindful of the situations and the people that we're putting our kids with. It's this kind of thing that really sort of brings that back to the forefront. And then, as is natural with many things, it sort of fades until the next major publicized episode comes. But I think the real lesson in this is that parents need to pay attention. They need to stay vigilant. And this is a good opportunity to sort of remind us of that and making sure that we're preparing our kids. And then the other dimension of this is really, as we prepare our kids both for their own safety, to sort of prepare them and ourselves and remind ourselves that there's a dimension, particularly of this Penn State issue, that seems to have been an underreport or a lack of report or a lack of follow-through. And so as we talk to our kids, as we as parents see things that are wrong, things that happen that don't feel quite right to us, I think we need to remind ourselves that we have permission to be vocal about that we need to go talk, consult, sort of check this out with somebody if something doesn't feel right in our gut. And as I was thinking about it the other day and talking with my own son about this particular issue, it really sort of reminded me of the whole bullying epidemic as well, because I think it's really the same message. If you see something that's not right, intervene, tell somebody, don't just push it under the rug for whatever reason.
Well, powerful stuff there. We really appreciate that. Dr. Pete Stavinoha, child neuropsychologist at the Children's Medical Center. Boy, speak up. As always, we're reminded yet again, speak up. Whatever you do, speak up.